Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Isaac from gunsforeveryone.com. No, Guns for Everyone. The website is gunsforeveryone.com. Hey, we're giving away this rifle right here. Giving it away. Not selling it, giving it away. If you want to know more about that, go to that place right there and figure out how you could be the recipient of this fantastic giveaway. We are raising funds for a legal fight that we're having in Colorado regarding the concealed carry training laws. Uh, and so we need your support, and this is one way that you can support us. All right, I got to start the video off correctly, although I've already fucked it up because this should come very first, but we're going to say a quick prayer to Santo Edgar. Santo Edgar, please help this video not suck. All right, there we go. Lit the candle. Bad things happen when we don't light the candle, so we're lighting the candle. All right. As I'm trying to remember to say at the beginning of these videos, I don't give a fuck about your subscriptions. I don't give a fuck about your likes or dislikes. I do give a fuck about comments. And comments is where we can continue the discussion, where we can challenge each other. You can challenge me, I can challenge you. I look forward to that because that's how we learn. Just got into a YouTube argument with another training channel. When I say argument, like I mean a discussion of facts and evidence and positioning that to further the discussion and the knowledge. I don't mean getting into a pissing match, but apparently that doesn't mean the same to everybody as it means to me. So I got into an argument with another instructor on YouTube, and he didn't have the time, I guess, or the energy to continue the conversation. So um, I want to. I mean, I will put as much effort as you do into the discussion if you decide to uh, disagree or argue or agree, but want more context or knowledge. And if I can provide it, I will give it. I'm not saying that I know everything, but I'm not going to quit a discussion in the comments. Uh, Even if it takes days and weeks to do it, I don't quit. I will have that discussion to the end. So anyway, all right, what are we going to talk about today? The concept of different ways that we can improve our defensive training or defensive skills for a self-defense encounter. There is a misconception out there that training can happen a lot of ways. And even if the ways are not totally correct, they're still useful. And the two that have come up in my conversations with people in the last week have been competition and simulated or scenario based training. Let's talk about competition. No, let's not talk about competition first. Let's talk about the right context. Let's describe the correct context that we are training for. So, self defense incident we call a dynamic critical incident, and it has three factors: it's surprising, it's chaotic, and it's threatening. The brain is an immensely sophisticated problem solving tool, but it's also a pretty simple problem solving tool. Much of the brain's problem solving capabilities is simple pattern recognition. If I see these elements, A, B, or C, or the combination of A, B, and C, then I train myself to respond, first to process that information, to catalog it, decide what I'm going to do about it, and then implement some kind of a response to it. This happens as soon as babies' central nervous systems are beginning to form, even inside the womb. That's why trauma can happen even when the baby is inside the womb. The trauma response is basically a pattern recognition response where we have stimulus and response. So the stimulus is um, even just a chemical stimulus coming through the mother to the fetus, and the fetus's response to that is just another chemical process, or electrochemical process. It's still a stimulus response pattern. Our understanding of language is pretty simple. The words coming out of my mouth right now are not words; they're sounds. but they're sounds in a particular pattern, and that pattern is first sensed by an infant, and then the response to those words or to those sounds starts to build a pattern recognition or pattern recognition and response in the infant. And the infant slowly learns how to take these very complex sounds and put them into context. And in that context, these sounds can now create new ideas, new realities. So, uh, not to get too detailed into that, but it's pretty amazingly complex how language works and how the brain processes that and responds to it, and how that whole process is built. So, but not in context, those sounds don't mean anything to us. In fact, they can create quite a bit of confusion if you take those words out of context. So you could have like a problem with the brain where it can no longer match those patterns to a learned response, and you might have a breakdown of the language skills in the brain because that pattern recognition is being interfered with. Um, so it's really important that we understand the relevance of the right context. When we're talking about self defense, we're talking about incidents that are surprising, are chaotic, and are threatening. If it doesn't have one of those things, if it's missing one of those elements, then it is not a self defense incident. So let's take out the surprising element. So let's say we're actually going on the offensive. The offensive means that we knew this was going to happen and that we are planning, at least for the beginning stages of it. So we could still have chaos. We could still have threatening. So this is maybe a military campaign, um, either a small, patrol or all the way up to a full-blown, full-scale invasion. Not surprising. We knew that this was going to happen. It's the chaos that we don't know. Okay. Chaotic and threatening, or surprising and chaotic without the threatening could be just a surprise party, right? You come into a room and you turn on the light and boom, everybody's there. You didn't know that was going to happen. In chaos, everybody's screaming at you, happy birthday, we love you, you suck, whatever. If you're at Edgar's birthday party, you're going to hear a lot of that. Uh, so what we're missing there is that nobody's trying to kill you. The body does not respond the same when there is no perception of a threat. We could have surprising and threatening, but no chaos. So this is like, let's take kind of a weird example. Let's say that you're very well trained in boxing, and there are rules to boxing, and we understand those rules. So we're going to work within those rules. But let's say you had a something that you didn't know was going to happen, but still abided by all these rules. It's kind of hard to come up with an example of that. But the chaos is the part where we're saying the things that you think are going to work, you don't know if they're going to work because you don't know what's going to happen. So we have to plan and train for the chaos. So when we're planning and training for the surprising, the chaotic, and threatening, the way we do this is to build skills that work well with the body and these things and our interaction with these things when they happen. So when we're talking about the surprising part, we want these skills to be on demand even when we didn't know that we're going to need those skills. So when it comes to drawing a gun from a holster, of course I've planned to draw a gun from a holster. Of course I know how to draw a gun from a holster. But is the way that I do it congruent with what if I had to do it without any warning at all? And part of that is really just the processing of information, that there is a reason to draw the gun from the holster. So if I'm in a competition, I fucking know I'm going to be drawing a gun from a holster. That's part of the competition, given that we're actually drawing from a holster. Not all competitions you draw from a holster. But if you are, you should know that you are. It's part of the rules about where the gun is going to start and how you're going to access the gun in order to use it. So the method that works well in competition does not necessarily work well in a context where you didn't know you were going to need to access the gun. The chaos, we need to be able to respond to what's happening moment to moment. And the way we do that is that we process information. So when we train for chaos, we train to process information and not just process information, learn to make decisions based on the information that we are gathering. The more information you can gather that's relevant to what's going on, the more likely you are to pick the right response to that. We talk about this in other videos. We've talked about this on our podcast where we say perception is reality. What you are perceiving is your reality in that moment. You might only be perceiving 1% of the relevant facts of what's going on around you, but that's all you can act on is what you are perceiving. So if we train in a way that helps you to perceive more information, then your perception improves. Your awareness and your understanding of the situation improves as long as we're taking in the right information. So, how do we train for chaos? We train on how to process more information and the right information and how to make decisions based on the perception of that information. And then the threatening element is our bodies respond to threats differently than they respond to other types of stimulus. So if somebody pokes you on the skin, well, that's not a threat, and you might respond by laughing. You might respond by telling, "Hey, I don't like to be touched." But if somebody pokes your skin with a gun, which you have now learned through stimulus and response patterns and pattern recognition, you have learned that this thing is a threat to your life. And if that pokes you, that's going to evoke a much different response from you based on what you know about what's going on in the moment. You could foresee a situation where somebody pokes you with a gun and you know it's not threatening. But we'll take a stimulus that your brain perceives as threatening, and what does it do in response to that? Well, the sympathetic nervous system starts to change things in the body that don't normally change that way. Your field of vision can change. Your ability to see things is changed in the moment. It's not the same as some other changes to your vision. It really comes down to a fixation to the center of the field of the vision. So you get hyper focused on specific things. Generally speaking, the thing that you can see and the thing that is dangerous is what we tend to hyper focus on. Your perception of time changes. You might feel time speeding up, you might feel time slowing down. What is going on in the brain is that the brain is processing information through a different system than it normally processes information. And that difference can cause the brain to perceive time differently. So you've heard of people saying, well, and time just slowed down, or I just see brief glimpses of what was going on. I don't have a continuous timeline. I just see flashes of moments in that time. And if you go read some of the studies of people who've been through threatening circumstances, plane crashes, car crashes, self-defense incidents, etc., mass shooters, blah, 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 when there is a significant perceived threat, generally speaking, it's not that hard to find tachypsychia in the recollected responses. Diminishment of finer motor skills. The blood flows differently in the body when it thinks it's going to need to respond to a threat. The body tends to prepare for movement and prepare for grosser motor movements. So it tends to force more blood to the torso, to the heart, lungs, etc. And it also tends to push more blood to the major muscle groups and away from the extremities. And these responses, the brain doing this stuff, the sympathetic nervous system doing this stuff is designed if you believe in the Sky Daddy, or evolved if you believe in natural selection, to be survival positive, to give us a better chance of surviving in the most number of circumstances. Okay? So when we train, we want to train for things that work well when the body is responding this way. So these are the elements that we're training for. Well, competition doesn't have any of this stuff. And by design, it doesn't have any of this. It would be dangerous for the competition to allow chaos on the range. Chaos will happen on the range, but it is specifically designed The competition is specifically designed to reduce chaos to the absolute controllable minimum that they can on the range. Obviously, it's not surprising. You showed up there on purpose to participate in the competition. You knew what was going to happen. And it shouldn't be threatening. You shouldn't be in an environment where they're to compete for with firearms involved when there is a believed threat. That I mean, if you've ever been a range officer or a competition stage master or whatever, you don't want anybody out there who believes that they're in danger or from a threat. That's unsafe. Okay, so we intentionally remove all these things from the competition, and the argument becomes, well, the skill is the skill. Pressing the trigger is pressing the trigger. Finding the sights is finding the sights. Presenting the gun is presenting the gun. And it's not, because things that work well in competition very possibly will not work well under these circumstances. Just as one example, we know that time is a factor in a fight. And we know we want to take the least amount of time necessary to do the thing that works in the fight. We want to be efficient, right? We also want to be efficient in competition because we're racing the clock in competition. So if I have multiple targets to engage in competition, and my repetitions in that environment allow me to shoot the gun with bent elbows, all right, and bring the gun up to my line of sight, but with my elbows bent. Well, there's time savings right here. But in the threatening environment, the body is more likely to go into a protective stance, and we want to utilize everything that's intuitive to the body in a fight. And extending the gun out and getting the head behind the gun is a much more intuitive response in the threatening environment than it is to shoot like this. And not only that, but instead of going out and coming back in a competition environment, if I can stay out as I'm finding the new targets, or as I'm moving to and finding the new targets, then I'm saving time by switching between targets by keeping my arms extended. But if I'm in a shopping mall and I'm walking around doing this, looking for a target, what do I look like to a police officer? I look like the person doing the shooting. And the police officer is more likely to treat me as a dangerous person who needs to be shot if they see this. Police officers working on pattern recognition. And somebody with a gun extended fits the pattern more of somebody needs to be shot than somebody with the gun in a more passive posture close to our body. Does it add time in a fight to keep the gun here until I've identified the threat and then extend the gun and press? Absolutely. But I need to work within this chaotic environment. And part of that chaos is the possibility of law enforcement perceiving me as a threat. This also includes in a competition running around like this, nobody's trying to attack and take the gun. But in a shopping mall, it is possible that if the gun is extended, somebody's more likely to take advantage of that to try to take control of the gun. So in the self-defense environment, I need to control the gun close to my body and look less like somebody who needs to be shot. And when I perceive the threat and I've made the decision to shoot, that's when the gun extends out to the threat and touch and press the trigger until I don't need to shoot anymore. In the competition, you're likely to, in fact, it's we could say it's a rule, not a rule like in the rule book, but a rule of human nature, that you are going to game the competition to find advantages. And one of the advantages, don't take the gun back to your body unless you absolutely need to. For instance, to move around a barrier or to safely get from one shooting position to another shooting position. But if you don't need to bring the gun in, don't bring the gun in. Well, that doesn't work in this environment. It's less effective, it's more dangerous to do that in this environment than it does to do in the competition. And what are the consequences if you do this wrong in a fight? Well, the consequences if you do this wrong in the fight could be that you lose the fight. So there is a better way to do it. But if you're gaming the competition, you're learning hard skills that are wrong for that context. Same is true for simulator training. And this person I was arguing with, they were showing a video of their simulator training. So you got the fancy screen with the interactive actors on screen, et cetera, et cetera. And the person in the video who supposedly is getting the good training is moving around within what looked like a school like this, looking for the bad guy. And we've already talked about that. But why is he doing that? There's no penalty for doing that in the simulator. You don't get, you don't have to worry about a cop shooting you. You don't have to worry about anybody grabbing the gun. So there's no penalty in the simulator training. So when we say things that are working in competition are going to work for you in a fight, that's the wrong context. Things that work well in a competition do not necessarily work well here. And so we don't train for this by training for the wrong thing. How do we train for this? Well, I already covered a lot of it. We train to do things that work even when we are surprised. We train to do things that work when there is chaos and help us improve our ability to respond to the chaos. And we do things that work well even when our body's natural responses, our sympathetic nervous system is engaged. Will your sympathetic nervous system be engaged every single time you have to defend with a firearm? Probably not. I mean, there's no way to measure that. There is, as far as I'm aware, there is no way to measure how many times somebody has been, like, all the circumstances where somebody has been in a fight and no sympathetic nervous system engagement. I imagine there might be a way to survey people where we could gauge the likelihood that their sympathetic nervous system affected the fight. But it would be extraordinarily complex measurement to do that. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that 10% of the time people defend with no engagement of the sympathetic nervous system. So, are we hurting or degrading your training by training for things that work when the sympathetic nervous system is engaged, even if it doesn't end up being engaged? I don't think so. I don't think there's anything that we train for that works well with that system that doesn't also work well when that system is not engaged, provided we're also working in the surprising and chaotic environment. Okay, so if we take these two things out and we take this element out, then absolutely we can make the argument to say, well, under these circumstances, you're training to fully extend your arms like this because it's intuitive within the threat response system, but it's actually faster if we do it X way. Yeah, but is it going to work in the chaotic and surprising context as well? So it turns out, I'm going to draw this kind of like something I've seen before. You've probably seen it too. Let's take the iceberg. No, let's not do the iceberg. Let's do the lake. Okay, so this is a body of water right here. There's a little beach umbrella. Okay, here's the water. The set of skills required to work well in these environments is a lot deeper. Oh, yeah, that looks like something. Okay, it's a lot deeper than it is wide. And there's this is the water line. There's this misconception that I should train for the widest number of things, when really I should work with skills that work deeply across circumstances rather than building individual hard skills that work across a wide range of circumstances. So let's talk about like war for a minute. Everybody wants to build the badass rifle. They want. I did a video on like how to build the best rifle, which was kind of tongue in cheek and kind of serious. You don't really know what's going to work for your rifle until you're actually in the specific type of battle. So we issue a bunch of guns to Vietnam soldiers, not realizing how the jungle environment may affect the rifle, and then we got bad performance from the rifle because we're using the rifle in the wrong environment. The greater the complexity of your sets of skills, the less likely you're going to be able to access the necessary skill within that context, within that moment. So we want a small set of skills that work across the widest number of circumstances, not the widest set of skills that work across the least amount of circumstances. So for the surprising element, we need to learn how to connect the surprising stimulus to the decision or to the automated response of locating the threat and preparing to defend or to flee, and then accessing the gun within that circumstance. That's not that difficult. It does require repetition and practice, but it's not that difficult to do that. And once you can do that, it becomes very efficient. Okay? The chaos. Well, a big part of what we do for training is learning how to gather more information in the shooting context, in the drill. I don't like to use the word drill; it gives the wrong impression. But within the learning environment, we teach you that once you've accomplished the primary task of stopping the primary threat, the next thing you need to do is continue to assess information. And once you've assessed information that's relevant and important, then you make a decision based on that. Again, not that difficult to do, but it does require repetitions. And then the threatening thing, we need to train physical skills that work well within the threatening environment. It's still pointing a gun, it's still pressing a trigger, it's still using the sights when you need them, it's still manipulating the firearm, but we want to do it in ways that don't require you to use things that won't work well in a threatening environment. So the way we teach reloads don't look at the gun when you reload. Why? Because of tachypsychia and task fixation. So if I look at a problem and I try to solve that problem, hyperfixated on the problem, so my visual field gets hyperfixated on the problem, and also my perception of time can cause me to behave in ways that aren't helpful to accomplishing the task. Instead, if this dude over here is trying to kill me and I'm in a 360-degree environment where things that are happening affect what's going on, if I get the tactile sensation of the gun going into slide lock, then I should be able to reload that gun from without needing to take my eyes and move them down to the gun, go through a hard set of steps that I always do to load the gun. And when I do that, I can continuously gather information from the world around me, including possibly from the threat, but maybe from other places or other things as well. Is it slower to load a gun without looking at it? Well, in the competition environment, yes. In the self-defense environment, no. It's faster to do it without looking at it, provided you've built the hard skill of reloading your gun without looking at it and knowing your gun needs to be reloaded without having to look at the gun. Okay. So we want these skills to be deeply entrenched. We want them to become automated. Think of automated skills like the way you drive your car, the pressing of the gas and the brake, the location, the steering of the car, the location of the mirrors, the location of a blinker should you need it. It's possible you use a blinker in an emergency. It's not a lot of skills that you're doing there. If you look at the grand scheme of things you could possibly learn about driving, it's not a lot of skills, but they're so automated that you can rely on them with zero additional thought on how to accomplish those tasks because you've done it so much. So your skills when you're driving are very narrow, but they are also very deep, and that's what we're looking for in training. A narrower set of skills that go much, much deeper that work well within this environment. So to summarize, how do we train for this? Train for the right things and don't do anything different than that, and build those skills progressively so that you can rely on them on an increasingly larger and larger set of circumstances rather than trying to adapt new skills or tools to the wide set of circumstances. Adapt the narrow set of skills and tools to the most number of circumstances. So to summarize or to end this, I'm going to quote Musashi. I can't remember Musashi's first name. It's always troubled me. But Musashi wrote the Book of the Five Rings, and the quote from the book is, "Those who understand the way broadly can apply it in all things." So once we understand this stuff really, really well, we can see how it applies across the greatest number of circumstances, even though it's not a complex, necessarily set of skills. So that's my take on using competition and simulators. Now, I'm going to add one more thing to this. I have been told by training mentors of mine that simulated training can be useful if done correctly. But what hasn't been defined is what is correct simulated training. So I'm not going to do simulated training. I'm not going to participate in it, and I'm not going to teach it. And so my focus hasn't been on developing the concepts around simulated training, but it's something that I want to start learning more about, the correct application of simulated training. But I suspect that it will be very similar to the way that we train pilots on simulated training, that we train them on how to master the skills necessary to aviate, navigate, communicate, and to do it in a complex aircraft versus a simplified aircraft. Anyway, I have a lot to learn about that. I'm not going to try to tell you how to do all that stuff. I honestly couldn't give you a good answer. But I do know, and having participated in simulated training in the past, I do know the serious pitfalls of the lack of the surprising element and the lack of the threatening element in simulated training. So, all right, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope that was useful to you. If you watched this whole thing, type the word banana in the comments. No, don't do that. That's fucking stupid. Argue with me in the comments. Let's just have that conversation. Let's, if you don't think I'm right, if you're missing something, if I'm missing something, let's talk about it in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. For the few of you who are actually here to learn, I appreciate the fuck out of you. All right. gunsforeveryone.com, gfenational.com for our training and upcoming stuff. We have an instructor certification course through the IDS program coming up in June, and maybe we'll see you there. All right, peace.